Hey guys, this is going to be a three-part lecture on the introductory material that you read today about literature. The first thing I want to start with is actually the first sentence in the book. It's Dickinson's epigraph, and it starts, "There is no frigate like a book." And so what I'm sort of interested in, and obviously if we were in class we would discuss this, but did you read this or did you skip over the epigraph? If you skipped it, I want you to think about why you skipped it. And if you read it, I want you to think about why you read it. Did you look up words that you didn't know? For instance, if I had given you a quiz and said, "What's a frigate?" how would you have done on that quiz? And I use this just to demonstrate, just to illustrate why it's important to read everything and look up unfamiliar words. Because if you didn't read this beginning epigraph, the beginning of the textbook starts in a very confusing place. The whole book is introduced using this epigraph. They talk about it for several paragraphs. And if you didn't read that epigraph, you start in this sort of confusing space where you're not really sure what's going on, and you're likely to feel a little off kilter as you're beginning to read. So this sort of thing can snowball quickly. You skip the poem at the start, you begin the reading a little confused, you get bored because you aren't really following what's happening, you quit reading because it seems sort of hard and pointless, and this thing they're talking about, you don't even know what it is. You fail the discussion post because you didn't do the reading, etc., etc. So it is really important to make sure that you're reading everything and that you look up any words that you don't know. It makes everything more interesting. It makes the reading easier and more interesting. It'll make these lectures easier and more interesting, your discussion posts, everything. Reading is going to be really, really important in this class. Reading can be hard, and I know some of you will struggle with it more than others, but sometimes important things are difficult, and all of you are capable of passing this class with a 70%, which is what you need to pass 1102. You have to get a 70%, a C minus. All of you are capable of that. Some of you will be capable of getting an A. Most of you will have to work really, really hard for that, but trust me when I say it is worth it. It is worth it to do this class right the first time, or second time if you're already on your second time. I have tried to pick the readings really carefully. I've tried to find ones that are interesting and accessible, things you'll be able to relate to, but still you will have to contend with some of them. You'll likely have to look words up in some of them. You'll have to read more than 3 pages. You'll have to stop, think, and digest what the author is trying to say. Some of it will be hard, but I promise you, you will learn something. I really do promise you that. You'll learn something about yourself, something about writing, and something about others if you do this class right. I think, like I said before though, you'll also find that things become more interesting when you actually do the reading, and when you're engaging with the material as a person and as a writer. My comments will make more sense. Your classmates' comments will make more sense. Class can get pretty boring pretty quickly. If you haven't done the reading, you're like, they're all talking about this stuff I haven't read, and you're kind of bored. You're kind of bored because you're not engaging with the material, okay? So the other thing that gets really difficult when you haven't done the reading is the assignments. Discussion posts are obviously super hard to do when you haven't done the reading. In-class writing, brainstorming assignments, much, much harder to do. Essays, almost impossible to write when you haven't done the reading. All of the assignments in this class are building towards the essays. I'm not going to assign you any busy work. I promise you that. I have designed all of this to work very carefully towards the final essay for each unit. Okay, so you're not just going to be doing worksheets of some sort that have nothing to do with anything. All of this is working towards making that essay better, okay? So please make sure that you start by doing the reading. It's going to take some self-discipline, but it's going to be totally worth it. I know some of you will also struggle with reading more than others, so if you find reading particularly difficult, here are some tips, okay? Number 1, If you feel yourself drifting as you're reading, make yourself reread the section. Do not move on until you have a grasp of that section. Look up words you don't know. I know it's a really small thing and it's kind of annoying, but if you don't understand all the words, it's really hard to understand the whole passage. Okay? So make sure that you understand that passage before you move on. Number 2, try to write a summary from memory of the passage you just read. When you start out, you might have to just start out with a couple of sentences at a time. But once you train yourself in really thinking about what you've just read, you'll be able to do a whole page or even a whole section. So make sure, again, this is sort of making sure that you're understanding what's happening before you move on. Number 3, as you're reading, be an active, critical reader. Mark sections that make you happy. Mark sections that make you angry. Mark things that you find interesting and you want to think about for a while. And do some thinking about why these are catching your attention. What is it in your background? What is it in your interests that make these stand out to you? Number 4, try to eliminate distractions. Internet, music, friends. I know you might think that you work better with these things, but you might find if you eliminate them that you actually work better without them. So try it both ways. You think you work better with music, try some with music, try some without music, but just give yourself a chance to really find that environment that works best for reading for you. Number 5, look for connections to your life and your community as you read. What does the story remind you of that you've experienced or heard about? How are the characters like you? How are they different? What could you learn from them that might actually be useful in your own life? I've really tried to pick texts that you'll be able to relate to. The connections might not always be incredibly obvious, but do try to look for those connections because I really think you'll find them. So, make sure you're doing the reading, and the next lecture will cover some specific tips for different types of reading. Good luck!